My sister cheered when Dad slapped me in front of 60 people, so I made one silent call that changed everything. My name is Aria. At a family gathering meant to honor our legacy, my sister applauded after our father slapped me in front of 60 people. She stood there beaming while he shouted, "Hand over the lake house. You've got no kids to leave it to." And my mother? She laughed, then called me a childless disappointment. They said it so casually, like they'd been rehearsing it their whole lives. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing this wasn't their first attempt to erase me. It was just the first time they did it in public. So I made one quiet call, just one. And everything they'd built started to crumble. But here's the thing. What kind of family plans your humiliation like a surprise birthday toast? And what would you do if they demanded everything you built because you didn't have children to deserve it? The email arrived on a Tuesday morning. I remember because Max, my golden retriever, had just knocked over his food bowl for the third time that week, and I was cleaning up kibble when my phone chimed. Thompson Family Celebration, honoring 15 years of success. That was the subject line. No dear Aria, no hope you're well, nothing personal, just a corporate-looking signature at the bottom from my sister Brooklyn and her husband Chase. It read like a mass mailing from a mortgage company trying to sell refinancing. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then did something I hadn't done in months. I called Brooklyn. She picked up on the second ring, her voice bright like she was mid-conversation at some charity luncheon. "Aria. How are you, honey? I was just thinking about you." "Hey," I said slowly. "I got your invitation. It doesn't have my name on it personally. Was that just?" "Oh." She cut me off like I was making a fuss over nothing. "Total printing error. You know how those online invites can be glitchy. Don't stress about it, okay?" She steamrolled past my silence. "It's just going to be a casual backyard thing at the house in Malibu. Some barbecue, a few speeches, you know, family bonding and all that good stuff." Family bonding. Right. I didn't say much more, hung up after a few pleasantries. I could have said no. I should have. But something in me, something that still hoped things could be different, made me say yes. That Saturday, I loaded up my Jeep and left Colorado Springs before noon. In the back seat was a wrapped gift, a custom photo album I'd spent 3 nights creating, filled with pictures from years past, Brooklyn's kids as toddlers, our parents when they still looked strong, even one of me and Brooklyn from college, smiling like we hadn't yet learned how to compete with each other. Beside it was a handcrafted quilt our grandmother had made before she passed, one that had been sitting in my guest room for years, waiting for the right moment to give it meaning. Max jumped into the passenger seat like he always did, head hanging out the window halfway through the drive. Having him there helped me breathe, like someone still remembered I existed. What I didn't know was that I was driving straight into an ambush. The party was held at Brooklyn's house in a gated Malibu community where every mansion looked like it came from the same architectural magazine. Perfect lawns, houses painted in variations of cream and taupe, the kind of neighborhood where the HOA rules were stricter than most rental agreements. There were about 40 cars lined up outside by the time I arrived. I parked down the street and walked up the cobblestone driveway with my gift in hand, nodding at a couple of neighbors I didn't recognize. They didn't nod back. The backyard had been transformed with white market tents and Edison bulb strings, tables covered in succulent centerpieces and branded napkins. A banner hung above the outdoor kitchen celebrating Thompson Family Legacy, 15 years of excellence. I wasn't sure what exactly we were celebrating, but clearly it didn't include me. A young woman at the welcome table, someone I'd never seen before, handed me a name tag. "Hi there. Here you go, guest number 42. I blinked. "I'm Aria, Brooklyn's sister." "Oh," she said, stammering. "Sorry, I just went by the list she gave us." Of course she did. I slipped the tag into my purse and walked in. Conversations swirled around me, familiar voices catching up about private school applications, vacation homes in Aspen, and kitchen renovations that cost more than most people's cars. Nobody looked up. Nobody called my name. The memory wall was impossible to miss, 12 feet wide, framed by twinkling lights. Thompson Family Memories, it proclaimed. There were dozens of photos, Brooklyn's wedding in Napa, her kids' birthday parties, Dad deep-sea fishing with Chase, Mom at Thanksgiving with a pie I'd actually baked and delivered. Except I wasn't in any of them. Not one. I stood there longer than I should have, searching for even a corner of my own existence. It wasn't there. I might as well have been a stranger who'd wandered in from the street. Someone behind me whispered, "Who's that?" "Brooklyn's cousin." I turned and smiled. "No, just her sister." They laughed awkwardly and hurried away. I moved to the gift table and gently placed my album down. A teenage boy, probably a neighbor's kid, swept by and slid it underneath the table, out of sight. Just like that. I spotted my mother near the bar and walked over. "Hi, Mom." She looked me up and down. "You made it," she said, her voice clipped. Her eyes immediately scanned the crowd, like she needed to return her attention to someone more important. Dad joined her, gave me a brief nod. No hug, no warmth. "Good to see you both," I said. Dad nodded again, reached for his whiskey. By the time dinner was served, I was seated at a folding table behind the sound system, next to the portable bathroom. No one mentioned my name in the speeches. No one unwrapped my gift. No one asked how I'd been, what I was doing, if I was okay. I smiled through every course, every toast, every rehearsed laugh. But something inside me started to twist, tight and sharp. The sun was setting behind the Pacific when Brooklyn tapped her champagne flute with her wedding ring. The soft chime of crystal sliced through the backyard chatter like a knife. I was seated at that folding table, pushed awkwardly against the far side of the tent, practically hidden behind a potted palm. Not that anyone had bothered to look for me anyway. As conversations quieted, a woman in a peach sundress, someone Brooklyn had probably hired for the event, approached with a plastic name tag. "Here you go," she chirped, handing it over with a pageant smile. I looked down. The tag read 47. Just a number. Around me, others wore tags with their actual roles: Uncle Pete, Aunt Linda, the Thompson matriarch. Labels that meant something. Identities. Mine felt like I was livestock being processed. I slipped the tag into my purse without comment. No point in making a scene about something so small when the message was already deafening. Across the yard, I spotted my old college roommate Rebecca. We caught each other's eyes, and she tilted her head as if to say, "You okay?" I managed a small nod, grateful that someone still saw me as human. Then Brooklyn stood. She looked radiant, I'll give her that. She always did in front of crowds. Her voice carried effortlessly, polished from years of charity galas and PTA presentations. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate the Thompson family legacy," she began, grinning like she was hosting the Golden Globes. "Tonight is about tradition, sacrifice, and building for the future." She launched into a well-rehearsed tribute to our parents, to Chase, to their kids. She used phrases like carrying the torch and making our ancestors proud. It was her favorite kind of language, lofty, empty, calculated. Then her eyes found mine across the crowded yard. "There's one more thing we've been hoping to discuss. Aria, could you join us up here for a moment?" My blood turned to ice water. Every head turned toward me. The clinking of silverware stopped. Even the kids quit fidgeting. I rose slowly, legs feeling like they were filled with concrete, and walked toward the center of the tent. My heartbeat hammered in my ears. Brooklyn smiled that too-sweet grin that always meant trouble was coming. "As you all know, Chase and I are doing everything we can to create lasting memories for Olivia and Jackson. We've been saving, dreaming, trying to give them the best foundation possible." She paused for effect, letting the crowd nod approvingly. "And Aria has this beautiful lake house up in Colorado. We think it would be such a generous gesture, such a family-first thing, if she made it part of the Thompson legacy for the kids." There it was. The murmur started instantly. A few supportive claps. Someone muttered, "That's so thoughtful." As if I'd already agreed. I glanced toward my parents. Mom wore her frozen social smile. Dad gave a slight nod of approval. They weren't surprised. This had been planned. Then Mom added, loud enough for everyone to hear, "It's not like she needs it. She doesn't have a family of her own." The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Something inside me cracked wide open. "No," I said, my voice cutting through the murmur like a blade through silk. Silence swept across the backyard. Every eye landed on me again, this time with confusion and discomfort. Brooklyn blinked rapidly. Dad's face darkened. Mom's smile twitched like a broken light bulb. "It's not yours," I said, looking directly at Brooklyn. "And it never will be." The hush was so complete I could hear the waves crashing against the rocks below the cliff. For a moment, Even the seagulls stopped calling. Then Brooklyn turned her back to me, gesturing to the crowd like nothing had happened. "Well, family discussions can get emotional," she laughed. "Let's move on to." But Dad was already moving. I heard the sound of his Italian leather shoes crossing the wooden deck behind me. Heavy, deliberate steps that I recognized from childhood, the sound that meant someone was about to pay. "You've always been ungrateful," he muttered under his breath. Before I could process the words, before I could even brace myself, his palm connected with my cheek with a crack that split the moment in half. I staggered sideways but didn't fall. My ear rang, and my face burned with the sting of his wedding ring catching my cheekbone. But it wasn't the physical pain that stunned me. It was the sound that followed. Applause. It started with Brooklyn. One slow, deliberate clap, like she was cueing the audience at a theater. Then another person joined. And another. Within seconds, the backyard filled with polite, restrained clapping, not the enthusiastic kind you'd hear at a concert, but the careful, social kind you'd hear at a school board meeting when someone announces a policy that only benefits the wealthy families. Cautious. Social. Complicit. I looked out across the sea of familiar faces. Cousins, neighbors, family friends, people who'd known me for decades. Not one of them moved to help. No one gasped in horror. No one stepped forward. I pressed my palm to my burning cheek, not to comfort myself, but to anchor the moment in my memory. Off to the side, I saw someone lift their phone and start recording. Perfect. Evidence. Brooklyn beamed with satisfaction, her arms crossed like she'd just watched a particularly well-executed performance. She had it coming, I heard someone say near the dessert table. Then Mom stepped forward. Claudette, with her freshly styled bob and her designer dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. Her voice was louder than I expected, projecting like she was addressing a town hall. "That's why you'll die alone," she announced. "You're just a selfish, childless waste." I stared at her, not because I couldn't believe she'd said it, but because she didn't even blink when she did. It was cold, not theatrical, not even angry, just matter-of-fact in her mind. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just looked at her and let that sentence hang in the air like a death sentence. There was nothing left to say to any of them. Nothing that would be heard, nothing they'd be willing to acknowledge even if I spelled it out in skywriting. I turned and walked away. No one followed. Rebecca looked like she wanted to. She took a step in my direction, but Brooklyn shot her a warning glance, a silent reminder of whose side everyone was expected to be on. I kept walking past the tables, past the tent poles, past the woman at the welcome table who suddenly found her clipboard fascinating. By the time I reached my Jeep, my face was still burning, but it wasn't from the slap anymore. It was from clarity. I sat in my Jeep with both hands gripping the steering wheel, Max whining softly in the back seat. He could sense the shift in my energy, from hurt to something much more dangerous. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked different. Not shocked, not devastated, just finished. "Remember this," I whispered to myself. "Burn every detail into your memory." I reached for my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the name I needed, Victoria Cross, attorney at law. She'd handled my divorce 3 years ago and had become something close to a friend. She picked up after 2 rings. "Aria, everything okay?" "I need to talk," I said, my voice steady as steel, "about what legal options I have for protecting my property and myself." She didn't hesitate. "I'm here. Whatever you need." During that 15-minute call, I learned about restraining orders, property protection laws, and elder financial abuse statutes. I also learned that everything I'd suspected about my parents' finances could be investigated. "Document everything," Victoria advised. "Every conversation, every threat, every attempt to manipulate your property. And Aria, don't let them know what you're doing until you're ready to strike." When I hung up, I had a list of action steps and a plan forming in my mind like puzzle pieces clicking into place. The drive back to Colorado Springs passed in a blur. I didn't play music, didn't stop for food, just drove with my hand steady and my mind calculating. Max slept in the passenger seat, occasionally lifting his head to check on me. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the mountain air felt cleaner, sharper. The lake house sat nestled among the pines like a fortress I'd built with my own hands, because I had. Every decision, from the stone fireplace to the wraparound deck, was mine. No one had helped. No one had asked to. Inside, I dropped my purse on the kitchen counter and walked straight to my home office. I opened my laptop and navigated to a folder I hadn't touched in over a year: family finances, personal records. There were dozens of files. Bank statements, receipts, Venmo screenshots, every loan, every just this once favor Brooklyn had asked for over the years. All of it documented, dated, and saved. I opened one labeled Lake House Transfer Draft 2019, a document Brooklyn had asked me to review 4 years ago, supposedly for tax planning purposes. I'd never signed it, but her name was already typed in bold as the recipient. Another file, Mom's Medical Fund 2021. It showed a $8,000 transfer from my account when their insurance had lapsed during Dad's job transition. He'd promised to reimburse me. He never did. But the file that made my stomach drop was labeled Dad's Business Bailout 2020. During the pandemic, when his restaurant supply company was hemorrhaging money, I'd quietly transferred $25,000 to keep him afloat. The agreement had been verbal, family helping family, no questions asked. Except now I had questions. Lots of them. I spent the next 3 hours creating a master spreadsheet. Every financial transaction, every favor, every time I'd been their safety net while they slowly wrote me out of their story. When I was done, I had documentation going back 15 years. Not just the money, though that totaled over $60,000, but patterns of behavior, manipulation, and systematic erasure. I saved everything to 3 different cloud accounts and printed hard copies. Then I made another call. Victoria? It's me again. I found something that's going to interest you. The video surfaced on Wednesday morning while I was having coffee on my deck, Max sprawled at my feet in a patch of sunlight. My phone buzzed with a notification from Rebecca. I'm so sorry this happened. The world needs to see. She'd posted the 27-second clip to her Instagram, then cross-posted to TikTok and Facebook. It showed everything: Dad's hand across my face, Brooklyn's slow clap, the crowd's applause, Mom's cruel words. Rebecca had captured it all. Her caption was simple: "This is how a family treated their youngest daughter at what was supposed to be a celebration. Abuse doesn't become acceptable just because it happens at a fancy party." Within 6 hours, the video had 50,000 views. By evening, it had crossed 500,000. The hashtag #ThompsonFamilyTruth started trending. I didn't respond to the flood of messages, didn't give interviews, didn't post anything myself. I let the truth speak without embellishment, because truth doesn't need spin, it just needs oxygen. That evening, Victoria called with updates that made my coffee go cold. "The forensic accountant found something interesting about your parents' taxes," she said. "They've been claiming your lake house as a family asset for depreciation purposes. For 3 years. My grip tightened on the phone. That's fraud. It gets worse. Your father opened a business credit line using the lake house as collateral, without your knowledge or consent. He owes $40,000. I sat in stunned silence while she continued. "And Brooklyn? She's been telling her social media sponsors that she has access to a family retreat property for content creation. She's been paid for posts featuring locations that look suspiciously like your lake house area." The audacity was breathtaking. They hadn't just tried to take my home, they'd been monetizing and leveraging it while systematically erasing me from their narrative. "What are our options?" I asked. "We report the tax fraud to the IRS. We file a cease and desist for the illegal use of your property as collateral. And we document every cent you've loaned them over the years as unreported gifts, which puts them in serious hot water with federal gift tax laws." By Friday, the dominoes started falling. Brooklyn's biggest sponsorship, a luxury kitchen appliance brand, dropped her after the video went viral. Their statement was professional but devastating: "We have paused our partnership with Mrs. Thompson pending resolution of ongoing family legal matters." Dad's business credit line was frozen pending investigation of the fraudulent collateral claim. Mom called me for the first time in 6 months, her voice shaky. "Aria, honey, can we talk about this privately? You're hurting the family." I let her voicemail play out without answering. The next morning, I received a formal letter from their attorney, the same one who'd helped draft that property transfer document years ago. They were demanding I cease all defamatory actions against the Thompson family and threatening to sue me for emotional distress. I forwarded it to Victoria with a single text: "Are they serious right now?" Her reply came back immediately: "Let them try. We have evidence of elder abuse, financial fraud, and assault." They're the ones who should be worried. But the real moment of reckoning came on Sunday afternoon, when an investigator from Adult Protective Services knocked on Dad's door. Someone had reported suspicious financial activity involving my mother's medical accounts. The complaint included detailed bank records showing multiple questionable transfers and a concerning pattern of financial manipulation around the time of Mom's early-stage dementia diagnosis. I'd like to say I felt victorious, but the truth was more complicated than that. I felt clean. Like a wound had finally been allowed to bleed out and heal properly. They tried to erase me, humiliate me, and steal from me. I'd simply stopped protecting their version of the truth. 6 months later, I was sitting on my deck watching the sunrise paint the mountains pink and gold. Max was getting grey around his muzzle, but he still insisted on our morning walks around the property. The lake stretched out before us like a mirror, reflecting nothing but peace. The legal fallout had been swift and thorough. Dad's tax evasion case resulted in $30,000 in penalties and fees. Brooklyn lost 3 major sponsorships and was forced to publicly disclose that she'd misrepresented her access to family properties. The credit line using my house as illegal collateral was dissolved, but not before damaging Dad's credit score permanently. Most significantly, the Adult Protective Services investigation revealed that Mom's financial accounts had indeed been manipulated during her cognitive decline. She was now in a beautiful assisted living facility in Denver, where I visited her every other weekend. She remembered me most days, though she never mentioned Brooklyn or Dad. The family group chat had been silent for months. No more holiday coordination, no more guilt-laden requests for money, no more pretending we were something we'd never actually been. But the real transformation wasn't about revenge, it was about reclamation. The lake house had become something I'd never intended but desperately needed, a sanctuary for women who'd been erased by their own families. I'd started quietly hosting weekend retreats for women rebuilding after financial abuse, emotional manipulation, or family estrangement. We called it Visible Again, not a formal non-profit, just a place where women could remember who they were before someone else tried to define them. This particular morning, 3 women were inside making breakfast. Diana, whose brothers had tried to force her out of the family business after their father died. Carmen, whose adult children had attempted to have her declared incompetent so they could access her retirement funds. And Janet, whose husband's family had spent 20 years treating her like an unpaid servant while taking credit for her contributions. I could hear them laughing in the kitchen, planning a hike to the waterfall. The sound was medicine. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Brooklyn's attorney wants to discuss a settlement. Apparently, she's facing bankruptcy. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt, they're meant to be left burned so you remember which direction leads to safety. Later that afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. Rebecca drove up from Denver with her teenage daughter, who was applying to colleges and wanted to see what standing up for yourself actually looked like. We sat on the deck with iced tea while Rebecca's daughter peppered me with questions about business, independence, and what it means to build a life on your own terms. "Do you miss them?" she asked with the blunt curiosity of youth. I considered the question seriously. "I miss who I thought they could be," I said finally. "But I don't miss feeling invisible in my own life." As they were leaving, Rebecca hugged me tightly. "You know that video changed everything for me too, right?" I realized I'd been letting my own family treat me like a convenience instead of a person. After they left, I walked down to the dock with Maximum. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the sky so clearly it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. I thought about writing in my journal, something I'd started doing regularly, but instead, I just sat in the Adirondack chair I'd built myself and breathed in the mountain air. The silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was earned. Sometimes the loudest strength is found in quiet refusal, refusing to be erased, to be used, to keep pretending that blood alone makes someone family. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about remembering that peace doesn't always come from forgiveness. Sometimes it comes from finally walking away and building something better in the space they tried to steal from you. What would you do if your own family crossed that line? Because sometimes, the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest, and the only way to heal is to stop letting them.